They wanted me broken. But now, it's my turn to strike.
They say electricity can't end you unless you touch both wires. My wife proved them wrong without ever laying a finger on me. The name's Eddie Parrish, and I used to think I had it all figured out. 39 years old, electrical engineer, co-owner of Parrish Electric with my brother John, nice house in Millbrook Heights, 2 daughters who still hugged me when I came home from work, and a wife who could make meatloaf taste like it came from a 5-star restaurant. Beth Parrish was the kind of woman who made other men jealous and other women competitive. Perfect blonde hair, perfect smile, perfect way of making me feel like I'd won the lottery just by getting her to say yes 15 years ago. I should have known something was wrong when she started asking me to buy things we couldn't afford. It started small. A new purse here, a spa weekend there. Then it escalated to remodeling the kitchen, upgrading her car, and finally the big one, demanding I buy her mother a brand new Lexus for her 70th birthday. A real man takes care of his wife's family, Eddie, Beth said over dinner at Romano's, our usual spot for special occasions. Her voice carried that sweet poison I was starting to recognize. My mother has been driving that old Honda for 8 years. It's embarrassing. I looked around the table. Beth's sister Karen nodded enthusiastically, her husband Mike avoiding eye contact like he always did when money came up. Beth's mother Ruth sat there with her arms crossed, waiting for my answer like a queen expecting tribute. The business has been tight lately, I said carefully. Maybe we could look at something certified pre-owned. Pre-owned? Ruth's voice could have cut glass. You want me to drive someone else's leftovers? Mom deserves better than that, Beth added, reaching across the table to squeeze her mother's hand. She raised 3 children on her own after Dad died. The least we can do is show some appreciation. I wanted to point out that Ruth had remarried a wealthy contractor 5 years after her husband died, but I'd learned to pick my battles. Instead, I smiled and nodded. Let me see what we can work out. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and did the math in my head. A new Lexus would run us at least $60,000. We had maybe 15 in savings, and the business account was earmarked for equipment upgrades we desperately needed. I could hear Beth breathing beside me, already asleep, probably dreaming about how grateful her mother would be. I should have been planning how to afford the car. Instead, I found myself wondering when my wife had stopped asking and started demanding. The next morning brought the first real shock. I walked into the Parrish Electric office to find my brother John huddled over paperwork with our accountant, Jerry Morrison. They both looked up when I entered, and something passed between them that made my stomach drop. Eddie, John said, his voice too bright. We were just going over the quarterly numbers. Good or bad? I asked, pouring myself coffee from the pot our assistant Joanne kept running all day. Mixed, Jerry said, which in accountant speak usually meant bad with a side of worse. John cleared his throat. We've got some opportunities coming up. Big opportunities. The Riverside Development Project, the new hospital wing, maybe even the casino expansion if we play our cards right. I sat down at my desk, which faced John's across our shared office. We'd set it up that way when we started the business 12 years ago. 2 brothers building something together. Equal partners, equal say in everything. At least, that's what I thought. What kind of opportunities? I asked. The kind that requires significant capital investment, Jerry said. New equipment, additional personnel, maybe even a second location. We've been talking about expansion for years, I said. What's different now? John and Jerry exchanged another look. This time I caught it full on, and it felt like ice water in my veins. The thing is, John said slowly, these opportunities require someone to be on site full time, managing the day-to-day operations, dealing with clients face-to-face. You know how important that personal touch is in our business? I nodded, waiting for him to continue. And with your situation at home, Beth wanting to spend more time together, maybe it makes sense for you to take a step back from the operational side. Focus on the technical work, the engineering. Let me handle the business development. The coffee in my mouth suddenly tasted like ash. My situation at home? Beth mentioned you've been stressed, John said. Working too many hours, missing family dinners. Maybe it's time to find a better work-life balance. When had Beth been talking to John about our marriage? And when had my brother started making decisions about my role in our company without consulting me? I think there might be some confusion here, I said carefully. We're equal partners. Any major decisions need to be discussed between us. Of course, John said quickly. That's exactly what we're doing. discussing. But it didn't feel like a discussion. It felt like an ambush. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing contracts and trying to shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my world. Around noon, Joanne knocked on my office door. "Eddie, there's a call for you on line 2. Says it's about your wife's spa appointment." I picked up the phone, expecting to hear from the local day spa where Beth occasionally treated herself. Instead, I got a cheerful receptionist from Serenity Springs Resort, a luxury destination 3 hours away. "Mr. Parrish, I'm calling to confirm Mrs. Parrish's reservation for this weekend. The couple's massage package, champagne dinner, and overnight suite. The total comes to $850 charged to the Mark Allen Associates corporate account as requested." My hand tightened on the phone. "I'm sorry, what account?" "Mark Allen Associates. Is there a problem with the billing?" "No," I said slowly. "No problem." I hung up and stared at the phone. Mark Allen was a local real estate developer, smooth-talking and successful. I'd met him a few times at community events. Beth had mentioned him once or twice, something about him looking into properties in our neighborhood. But why was he paying for my wife's spa weekend? The rest of the day crawled by. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept circling back to that phone call. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe Mark Allen was developing a spa, and Beth was consulting on the design. She had good taste. Everyone said so. Maybe it was perfectly innocent. I almost convinced myself until I got home and found Beth packing a suitcase. "Going somewhere?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Spa weekend with the girls," she said without looking up from folding clothes. "I told you about it last week. With Karen and Tasha?" She held up 2 dresses, considering. "The blue one or the red one?" "For a spa? They have a nice restaurant. I want to look good." I watched her pack the red dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago, the one she'd worn exactly once. "How much is this weekend costing?" "Don't worry about it," she said, zipping the suitcase. "Karen's treating. Her husband got a bonus." Mike worked at a hardware store. His bonuses wouldn't cover dinner at Romano's, let alone a weekend at Serenity Springs. "Beth," I started, but she was already heading for the door. "I'll be back Sunday night. There's leftover casserole in the fridge for you and the girls." She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her keys, and was gone before I could ask any more questions. I stood in our bedroom, surrounded by the familiar chaos of Beth's getting ready routine. Makeup scattered across the dresser, discarded outfits draped over the chair, the lingering scent of her perfume in the air. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt right. That weekend, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to Serenity Springs. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I'd see Beth laughing with Karen and Tasha by the pool and feel like an idiot for doubting her. I'd buy them all drinks, make a joke about being the overprotective husband, and drive home with my marriage intact. Instead, I saw my wife having dinner with Mark Allen on the resort's terrace, his hand covering hers on the table while they gazed into each other's eyes like something out of a romance movie. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching them through the restaurant windows. Beth threw back her head and laughed at something Mark said. He leaned forward and whispered in her ear. She blushed and touched his arm. 15 years of marriage, and I'd never seen her look at me like that. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the shock had crystallized into something harder and colder. I walked through our house, the house I'd worked 60-hour weeks to afford, filled with furniture Beth had chosen and pictures of our family, and saw it all differently. The credit card bills that had been climbing steadily, the new clothes that appeared in Beth's closet, the mysterious phone calls that ended when I walked into the room, the way she'd been pushing for me to spend more money, take on more debt, make bigger financial commitments. The way my brother had been acting strange at work, making decisions without me, talking to my wife about our marriage. I was still sitting in the dark living room when Beth came home Sunday night, glowing with what she claimed was the relaxation of a spa weekend. "How was your time with the girls?" I asked. "Wonderful," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We should do it more often. Maybe next time I'll come along. Meet Karen and Tasha's husbands. Oh, you know how girls' weekends are. No boys allowed." She kissed the top of my head and headed upstairs to unpack. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the sound of our bedroom door closing, the shower turning on. I'd been married to a stranger, and I was just figuring it out. Monday morning brought the second shock, bigger than the first. I arrived at the office to find a moving truck outside and strange men carrying boxes out of the building. "What the heck is going on?" I asked Joanne, who was standing by her desk with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Eddie. John said he tried to call you this weekend." I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from John, all on Saturday while I was driving to Serenity Springs. Where is he? Conference room with the lawyers. I found John sitting at our conference table with 2 men in expensive suits and a woman I recognized as Patricia Voss, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. "Eddie," John stood up, his face a mask of false concern. "I'm glad you're here. We need to talk." "About what? And why is Patricia Voss in our conference room?" Patricia smiled, the kind of smile sharks probably practiced in mirrors. "Mr. Parrish, I represent your wife in her divorce proceedings. I'm here to discuss the business assets that will need to be evaluated and potentially liquidated as part of the settlement." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. "Divorce proceedings?" "Beth filed this morning," John said. "I'm sorry, Eddie. I know this is hard." "You knew she was filing for divorce?" "She called me last night. She was worried about how you'd react, wanted me to be here for support." I looked around the table at the 4 faces staring back at me. John, who looked guilty but determined. Patricia, who looked predatory. The 2 other lawyers, who looked bored. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "My wife filed for divorce without telling me, and my business partner knew about it before I did." "Eddie," John started, "and now there are moving trucks outside our office." "We're relocating," one of the suits said. "Mr. Jonathan Parrish is expanding the business. New location, new opportunities." "Jonathan Parrish?" I looked at my brother. "Since when do you go by Jonathan?" "It sounds more professional." "More professional than what? Than John Parrish, equal partner in Parrish Electric?" The silence stretched out like a live wire. "Eddie," John said finally, "I think it's time we talked about restructuring our partnership." That's when I understood. This wasn't just my marriage falling apart. This was a coordinated attack on everything I'd built, orchestrated by the 2 people I'd trusted most in the world. I walked out of that conference room, past the moving trucks, past Joanne's tear-stained face, and got in my truck. I drove home to find another moving truck in my driveway, and my house being systematically emptied by strangers. Beth stood on the front lawn directing traffic like a general commanding troops. She saw me pull up and walked over, her face set in determined lines. "Eddie, I know this is sudden, but I think it's for the best." "Where are my daughters?" "With my mother, I thought it would be easier if they weren't here for this." "Easier for who?" She handed me a manila envelope. "The divorce papers. Patricia says, if you cooperate, we can make this quick and clean." I opened the envelope and scanned the first page. Beth was asking for the house, half the business, alimony, and primary custody of our daughters. In return, I'd get visitation rights and whatever debts we'd accumulated. "Quick and clean," I repeated. "We've grown apart, Eddie. You know we have. You work all the time. I feel neglected. The girls barely see you. This isn't anyone's fault." I watched a stranger carry my favorite chair out of my house and load it into a truck. "Where are you moving?" "I found a place. Somewhere I can start fresh." "With Mark Allen?" Her face went white, then red. "I don't know what you mean." "Serenity Springs, Saturday night, the Terrace Restaurant." For a moment, I saw fear flicker across her features. Then it was gone, replaced by defiance. "I'm not going to apologize for finding someone who treats me well." "How long?" "Eddie, how long have you been sleeping with him?" She lifted her chin. 6 months? 6 months. Half a year of lies, of coming home to a woman who was planning my destruction while I worried about affording her mother's car. "And John, how long has he been planning to steal the business?" "He's not stealing anything. He's buying you out." "With what money?" "Mark is investing. They're forming a partnership." The picture was finally coming into focus. My wife's lover was bankrolling my brother's buyout of our company. They'd probably been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every conversation, every decision, every moment of my life had been manipulated to bring me to this point. "You could have just asked for a divorce," I said. "You didn't have to destroy everything." "I tried to make it work, Eddie. But you never listened. You never changed. You just kept working and working, ignoring what I needed, what our family needed." "What did our family need? More debt? More lies?" "We needed a husband and father who put us first. Mark does that. Mark doesn't have a wife and kids to support. He will soon." The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. She was going to marry him. My daughters were going to have a stepfather who'd helped destroy their real father's life. I looked at my house, my wife, the life I'd thought I was building, and felt something fundamental break inside me. Not my heart. That was already gone. Something deeper. The part of me that believed in fairness, in loyalty, in the basic decency of people I loved. "I'll fight this," I said. "You'll lose. Patricia says men almost always lose in situations like this, especially when there are questions about their stability." "What questions about my stability?" "John says you've been acting erratic at work. Missing meetings, making poor decisions. He's worried about your mental health." I stared at her, this woman I'd shared a bed with for 15 years, who was now calmly explaining how she and my brother had set me up to look incompetent. "You've thought of everything. I've thought of our daughter's future. They deserve better than this." A moving truck pulled away from the curb, followed by another. In the space of 2 hours, my life had been packed up and redistributed. I stood in my empty driveway, holding divorce papers and watching my wife lock the front door of what used to be my house. Where am I supposed to live? "There's a motel on Route 9. Patricia says you can stay there until you find something permanent." She got into her car, the car I'd been making payments on, and drove away without looking back. I stood there until the sun went down, holding those papers and thinking about electricity, about how power flows from positive to negative, how circuits complete themselves, how every action has an equal and opposite reaction. They thought they'd cut me out of the circuit, left me powerless. They were about to learn that I knew a thing or two about rewiring. The Sunset Motel on Route 9 was the kind of place where people went to disappear. Faded pink stucco, neon sign with half the letters burned out, and a desk clerk who didn't ask questions as long as you paid in cash. I rented room 23 for a week and sat on the sagging bed, staring at the divorce papers until the words blurred together. Irreconcilable differences, mental instability, abandonment of family responsibilities. Beth and her lawyer had built a narrative where I was the villain of my own life story. The absent father, the workaholic husband, the unstable business partner who couldn't handle success. It was a masterpiece of character assassination. And the worst part was how reasonable it sounded. I'd worked long hours, I had missed some family dinners. I'd been stressed about money and probably hadn't been the most attentive husband. In the right light, with the right spin, those facts could be twisted into evidence of fundamental failure. But I knew something Beth and John didn't know. I'd spent 12 years building Parish Electric from nothing, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. I knew where every penny went, every contract we'd signed, every corner we'd cut to stay competitive. And I knew my brother well enough to spot the lies in his sudden transformation into Jonathan Parrish, successful entrepreneur. The next morning, I drove to Millbrook Diner and ordered coffee from Sally, who'd been serving breakfast to half the town for 20 years. Word travels fast in a place like this, and I could feel eyes on me as I sat in a corner booth with my laptop and a legal pad. "Heard about you and Beth," Sally said, refilling my cup without being asked. "Sorry, Eddie. That's rough. Thanks. For what it's worth, I never liked her much. Too fancy for her own good, if you ask me." I looked up at Sally's weathered face, surprised by the support. Most people seem to think this is my fault. Most people don't know what it's like to work your tail off for ungrateful family. My ex-husband pulled similar crap 20 years ago. Left me with 3 kids and a mountain of debt so he could run off with his secretary. "What did you do?" Sally's smile was sharp as a blade. "Made sure everyone in town knew exactly what kind of man he was. Funny how fast his new girlfriend lost interest when she found out about all the bills he'd left behind." She moved on to other customers, but her words stuck with me. Information was power, and I'd been operating with incomplete information for too long. Time to change that. I spent the morning making phone calls, first to Ray Morrison, a private investigator I'd met through work. Ray had done background checks on potential employees and investigated insurance fraud for us. He was expensive, but thorough. "Eddie Parrish," Ray's gravelly voice came through the phone. "Heard you're having some domestic troubles. News travels fast. Your brother's been telling anyone who'll listen that you had some kind of breakdown. Says he's worried about you." My grip tightened on the phone. What exactly is he saying? That you've been unstable for months, missing work, making bad decisions, talking about paranoid conspiracy theories. He's painting himself as the responsible brother trying to hold the business together. And people believe him? People believe what they want to believe. John's always been the charming one, right? The people person. You're the technical guy, the one who stays in the background. When there's a he-said situation, charm usually wins. I closed my eyes. John had always been better at schmoozing clients, working a room, making people like him. I'd been content to let him handle that side of things while I focused on the actual work. Another mistake in a growing list. Ray, I need you to investigate my wife's relationship with Mark Allen, and I need you to look into my brother's finances. Something doesn't add up about this business expansion. That'll cost you. How much? $5,000 to start. Could be more if I have to dig deep. I thought about my bank account, already strained from the motel and legal fees I'd need. Do it. Eddie, word of advice? Don't talk to anyone about this investigation, not friends, not family, nobody. If your brother's as smart as you think he is, he'll be watching for any sign that you're fighting back. I spent the afternoon driving around town, seeing my life from the outside for the first time in years. There was Parish Electric's old office, now empty with a for lease sign in the window. There was my house, with Beth's car in the driveway and curtains drawn tight. There was Millbrook Elementary, where my daughters went to school, and where I'd never see them again if Beth got primary custody. Everything looked the same, but I felt like a ghost haunting my own existence. That evening, I got a call from my mother. Eddie, what in God's name is going on? John says Beth left you and you're living in some motel like a vagrant. It's complicated, Mom. Complicated how? Marriage is work, Eddie. You don't just give up when things get difficult. I could have told her about Mark Allen, about the affair, about John's betrayal, but my mother had always favored John, always found excuses for his failures and reasons to criticize my successes. She'd raised us to believe that charm and personality mattered more than hard work and reliability. Beth filed for divorce. She's been seeing someone else. Well, maybe if you'd paid more attention to your wife instead of burying yourself in that business, the business John is now stealing from me. Stealing. Eddie, that's a terrible thing to say about your brother. John says you've been acting paranoid, making wild accusations. Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist, or... I hung up. An hour later, John called. Eddie, Mom says you hung up on her. That's not like you. A lot of things aren't like me lately. Look, I know you're upset about Beth, but taking it out on family isn't going to help anything. Where's the new Parish Electric office, John? What? The business you're expanding. Where's the new location? We're still finalizing details. Bees. You had moving trucks at the old office yesterday. You've got lawyers and investors lined up. This isn't something you planned over the weekend. Silence on the other end of the line. How long have you been planning to push me out? Eddie, nobody's pushing you out. We're restructuring with Mark Allen's money. Another silence, longer this time. I don't know what you think you know, John said finally, but you need to be careful about making accusations you can't prove. Is that a threat? It's advice from someone who cares about you. If you cared about me, you wouldn't have conspired with my wife to destroy my life. Your wife came to me because she was worried about you. She said you'd been acting strange, talking about people being out to get you. She was scared, Eddie. Scared of what you might do. The gaslighting was masterful. Take my legitimate concerns about Beth's behavior and reframe them as paranoid delusions. Make my discovery of their affair look like unfounded jealousy. Paint me as the unstable one while they position themselves as the reasonable adults trying to manage a dangerous situation. You're good at this, I said. I'll give you that. Good at what? Lying. You always were. Remember when you crashed Dad's car in high school and convinced him I'd been driving? That was 20 years ago. Or when you stole money from the register at your first job and let your coworker take the blame? Eddie, I should have seen this coming. You've been practicing your whole life. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning brought a knock on my motel room door. I opened it to find a sheriff's deputy with an official-looking document. Edward Parrish? Yeah. I'm serving you with a restraining order. You're to have no contact with Elizabeth Parrish or the minor children Rebecca and Brianna Parrish. You're also prohibited from coming within 500 feet of the family residence or the children's school. I took the papers with numb fingers. On what grounds? Threatening behavior and harassment. Says here your wife fears for her safety and the safety of your children. After the deputy left, I sat on the motel bed and read the restraining order. According to Beth's sworn statement, I'd been calling her at all hours. driving by the house, making threats against her and Mark Allen. I'd exhibited erratic behavior and had access to firearms through my work. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. The restraining order was now part of the legal record, more evidence of my supposed instability. If I violated it, I'd be arrested. If I tried to see my daughters, I'd be painted as a dangerous father who couldn't respect boundaries. They were systematically cutting me off from everything that mattered to me. And they were using the legal system to do it. I was starting to understand that this wasn't just about a cheating wife and a greedy brother. This was about power, control, and the complete destruction of Edward Parrish so that Jonathan Parrish and his new partners could build something on the ruins. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought I'd go quietly. I called Ray Morrison. "I need that information faster," I said. "Whatever it costs." "What's the rush?" "They're not just stealing my life, they're erasing it. And if I don't fight back soon, there won't be anything left to fight for. Give me 3 days." While I waited for Ray's investigation, I did some digging of my own. I drove to the courthouse and pulled public records on Mark Allen's real estate deals. I visited the bank where Parrish Electric had our business accounts and spoke to our longtime account manager. I called suppliers, contractors, and clients, carefully probing for information about John's new venture. What I found was a pattern of deception that went back months. John had been setting up shell companies, moving money, and making deals behind my back. He'd used Parrish Electric's reputation and client list to secure contracts for his new business, then claimed I was too unstable to fulfill our obligations. Mark Allen, meanwhile, had been buying up properties around town, often at below-market prices from sellers who seemed unusually motivated to close quickly. I couldn't prove it yet, but it looked like he was using inside information about zoning changes and development plans to target specific properties. The affair with Beth wasn't just about love. It was about business. Mark needed a way to get information about the electrical contracts for his developments, and Beth had access to Parrish Electric's files through her relationship with John and me. John needed capital to buy me out and expand, and Mark had money to invest. Beth needed a way out of a marriage she'd grown tired of, and both men needed her cooperation to make their scheme work. It was elegant, really. Everyone got what they wanted, except me. On Thursday, Ray called with his preliminary findings. "Your wife's been seeing Alan for 8 months, not 6 like she told you. Started right after he hired Parrish Electric to do the wiring on his Riverside project. They've been meeting at his condo, various hotels, and at least 3 out-of-town trips that were charged to his business account. What about John's finances? That's where it gets interesting. Your brother's been hemorrhaging money for 2 years. Bad investments, gambling debts, and a white powder habit that's costing him about $2,000 a month." I sat up straighter. "John's using pills?" "Has been for at least 18 months. My contact at the police department says he's never been arrested, but he's known to frequent some establishments where recreational pharmaceuticals are readily available." How does a man with gambling debts and a pills habit convince someone to invest in his business? By having a partner with an impeccable reputation and a successful track record. Mark Allen isn't investing in Jonathan Parrish. He's investing in Parrish Electric, the company you built. Your brother's just the vehicle he's using to get control of it. The pieces were falling into place. John needed money to pay his debts and feed his habits. Mark needed a legitimate electrical contractor for his real estate empire. Beth wanted out of her marriage and into a more luxurious lifestyle. They'd found a way to give everyone what they wanted by destroying me. "There's more," Ray continued. "Alan's been buying properties based on insider information about city development plans. Nothing technically illegal, but ethically questionable. And some of those property sales involved sellers who were facing financial pressure right before Alan made his offers." "What kind of financial pressure?" "The kind that comes from having their electrical systems condemned by city inspectors. Funny thing is, most of those inspections were requested by Parrish Electric as part of routine maintenance contracts." My blood ran cold. "John's been sabotaging electrical systems to force property sales?" "Can't prove it yet, but the pattern's suspicious. Property owner hires Parrish Electric for routine work. Suddenly, there's a major electrical problem that requires expensive repairs. Owner gets scared and sells cheap to Alan, who then hires Parrish Electric to fix the problems that mysteriously aren't as bad as originally reported. It was fraud on a massive scale, using our company's reputation and my expertise to manipulate property values. And if it ever came to light, I'd be the one who took the blame as the technical expert who'd signed off on the inspections. Ray, I need you to document everything. Every property sale, every inspection report, every connection between John and Alan. And I need you to find out what Beth knew about this. That'll take time and money. I've got more motivation than money right now, but do it anyway. That night, I sat in my motel room and planned my counterattack. They'd used the legal system, social pressure, and financial manipulation to destroy me. They'd counted on me being too shocked, too hurt, too decent to fight back effectively. They were about to learn that decent men, when pushed far enough, could be more dangerous than criminals. Criminals had to worry about getting caught. I had nothing left to lose. I started with the one ally I knew I could trust, Joanne, our longtime assistant. She'd been with Parish Electric since the beginning, knew where all the bodies were buried, and had always been fiercely loyal to the company's original mission. I called her at home. "Eddie, I was hoping you'd call. I've been so worried about you." "I'm okay, Joanne, but I need your help. Anything. John's going to ask you to work for his new company. I need you to say yes." "What, Eddie? I would never—" "I need someone on the inside, someone who can document what he's really doing with the business we built." There was a long pause. "You think he's doing something illegal?" "I think he's been doing something illegal for months, using our reputation to cover for it. And when it comes to light, he's going to make sure I take the blame." "What do you need me to do?" "Keep copies of everything. Every contract, every inspection report, every financial document. Store them somewhere safe. And keep your ears open for anything that connects John to Mark Allen's real estate deals." "Eddie, if John finds out I'm spying on him, then you tell him I asked you to do it. You tell him you're worried about me, that you think I might do something desperate, and you're trying to gather information to help the family stage an intervention. Will that work? John thinks I'm having a mental breakdown. He'll believe you're trying to help him manage the situation." After I hung up with Joanne, I called my daughter's school and spoke to the principal. I explained that I was going through a divorce, that there might be some confusion about custody arrangements, and that I wanted to make sure the school had accurate information about who was authorized to pick up my children. "Of course, Mr. Parrish, we'll make sure our records are up to date. There's one more thing. If anyone calls asking about my daughter's well-being or suggesting that I might pose a danger to them, I'd appreciate it if you'd contact me directly. There's been some misinformation circulating, and I want to make sure the school has the facts." "Absolutely. We've known you and your family for years, Mr. Parrish. We'll make sure to verify any concerning reports before taking action." It wasn't much, but it was a start. I was building my own network of allies, people who knew me well enough to question the narrative Beth and John were spreading. The next morning, I got dressed in my best suit and drove to the offices of Patterson, Hayes & Associates, the most prestigious law firm in the county. If Beth had Patricia Voss, I needed someone equally ruthless. Margaret Patterson was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that could cut through lies like a scalpel. She listened to my story without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "This is a complex case," she said when I finished. "Your wife and brother have been planning this for months, possibly longer. They've built a narrative that makes you look unstable and them look reasonable. Fighting it will be expensive and difficult." "How expensive?" $50,000 to start. Could be twice that if it goes to trial. I thought about my dwindling bank account. I don't have that kind of money. "Then you need to find it, because if you don't fight this, you'll lose everything. Your business, your children, your reputation. And based on what you've told me about these property deals, you might also end up facing criminal charges as the fall guy for your brother's fraud scheme. What if I could prove the fraud? Would that change things?" Margaret's smile was sharp as a knife. "Mr. Parrish, if you can prove that your brother has been using your business to commit fraud and that your wife knew about it, then we're not just talking about a divorce case anymore. We're talking about a criminal conspiracy that could send all of them to prison." I left her office with a retainer agreement and a plan. I had 2 weeks to come up with $50,000 and enough evidence to prove that I wasn't the villain in this story. Time to show them what a real electrical engineer could do when he put his mind to it. The war was just beginning. 2 weeks later, I had everything I needed to destroy them. Ray's investigation had uncovered a paper trail that read like a manual for real estate fraud. Over the past 18 months, John had conducted routine inspections on 43 properties around the city. Of those, 37 had been condemned for electrical problems requiring immediate and expensive repairs. Within 30 days of each condemnation, Mark Allen had approached the property owners with cash offers at 60 to 70% of market value. After purchasing the properties, Allen had hired the new Jonathan Parrish Electric to fix the electrical problems, which mysteriously turned out to be much less severe than originally reported. The total value of the fraud was over $2 million, but the smoking tool came from Joanne, who had taken my advice and accepted a position with John's new company. She'd been copying documents for 2 weeks when she found the insurance policies. John had taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on me 6 months ago, listing himself as the beneficiary. The application claimed I'd been suffering from severe depression and had been making statements about ending it all. According to the policy documents, John was worried about my mental health and wanted to make sure the business could survive if I did something desperate. They weren't just planning to destroy my life, they were planning to profit from my death. I sat in Margaret Patterson's office on a Friday afternoon, surrounded by boxes of evidence, and watched her face grow darker as she reviewed the documents. "This is attempted homicide," she said finally. "They've created a narrative where you're unstable, isolated you from your support system, and positioned themselves to benefit financially from your death. If anything happens to you, an accident or anything suspicious, your brother collects $2 million and your wife gets to play the grieving widow who tried to save her troubled husband. Can we prove it? We can prove the fraud. We can prove the insurance policy was taken out under false pretenses. We can prove your wife's affair and your brother's financial problems. What we can't prove is intent to commit homicide, but we don't have to. The fraud alone is enough to send them both to prison for 10 years. I thought about Beth, probably at Mark Allen's condo right now, planning her new life with my daughters. I thought about John, sitting in what used to be our office, believing he'd outsmarted me. I thought about my daughters, who'd been told their father was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. "I want to confront them," I said. "Absolutely not. We take this to the district attorney and let the criminal justice system handle it. They've been destroying my reputation for months. My daughters think I'm crazy. My friends think I'm a failure. Half the town thinks I'm some kind of deadbeat who abandoned his family. And when they're arrested and the truth comes out, your reputation will be restored. Will it? Or will people just remember the scandal? The electrical contractor who couldn't keep his wife happy? Whose brother stole his business? Who ended up living in a motel?" Margaret leaned back in her chair. "What are you proposing?" "I want to expose them publicly, in front of everyone who matters. I want them to have to face what they've done. That's risky. If you confront them directly, they could claim you're threatening them. With your history of alleged mental instability, it could backfire. Not if I do it right." I told her my plan. She listened with growing alarm. "Eddie, that's not justice, that's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing." That evening, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Beth. "I want to see the girls," I said. "You know you can't. The restraining order. I'm not asking to be alone with them. I'm asking for a supervised visit. 1 hour with you present. At a public place. Eddie, I'm their father. I have rights. And if you refuse, my lawyer says it'll look bad for you in court." There was a long pause. "Fine. 1 hour, tomorrow at 2 o'clock at Riverside Park. Thank you." The second call was to John. "I want to talk," I said, "about the business, about everything." "Eddie, I don't think that's a good idea. You've been making some wild accusations. I'm tired of fighting. You win. I just want to understand what happens next." "What do you mean?" I want to know what my options are. Do I get bought out? Do I just walk away? What happens to my half of the business we built together?" I could hear the relief in his voice. "We can work something out. Something fair. Can we meet tomorrow? Maybe at the park around 2? I'm seeing the girls then, and I'd like them to see that their father and uncle aren't enemies." That's a good idea, Eddie. I think that would be good for everyone." The third call was to Mark Allen. "This is Eddie Parrish," I said. "Eddie, I don't think we should be talking—" "Relax. I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling to congratulate you." "What?" "You won. You got the girl, you got the business partnership, you got everything you wanted. I'm not going to fight it anymore." "I don't understand." "I'm meeting Beth and the girls tomorrow at Riverside Park at 2. I'm going to tell them I'm moving away, starting over somewhere else." "I thought you might want to be there. Show the girls that you're not the enemy, that we can all be adults about this." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. It's time to move on." Saturday afternoon, I arrived at Riverside Park 30 minutes early. It was a beautiful day, warm and sunny, with families scattered across the grass and kids playing on the playground equipment. I chose a picnic table near the center of the park, where anyone walking by could see and hear what was happening. At exactly 2 o'clock, Beth arrived with my daughters. Becca, 15 and beautiful like her mother, walked with the sullen posture of a teenager who'd been dragged somewhere she didn't want to be. Bree, 13 and still young enough to show excitement, ran toward me before Beth called her back. "Daddy!" Bree threw her arms around me, and for a moment everything else disappeared. "Hey, sweetheart, I missed you." Becca hung back, her arms crossed. "Mom says you've been sick." "I've been going through a hard time," I said carefully, "but I'm getting better." John arrived 5 minutes later, followed by Mark Allen. I watched Beth's face when she saw Mark, saw the flush of pleasure that crossed her features. She still looked at him like he was her salvation. "Eddie," John said, extending his hand, "I'm glad we're doing this." I shook his hand and smiled. "Family's important." Mark looked uncomfortable, but he nodded politely. "Beth says you're handling this whole situation with a lot of maturity. I'm trying to do what's best for everyone." We sat at the picnic table, my daughters on either side of me, Beth and Mark across from us, John at the head of the table like he was chairing a board meeting. To anyone watching, we looked like a family having a pleasant afternoon in the park. "So," John said, "what are you thinking about the business situation?" "I've been doing some research," I said, pulling a manila folder from my jacket, looking into property values, development trends, that sort of thing. I wanted to understand what you and Mark are building together. I opened the folder and spread out photographs across the table. Aerial shots of properties around the city, each one labeled with an address and date. "These are all properties that Parish Electric inspected in the last 18 months, I said conversationally. "Interesting pattern, don't you think?" John's face went pale. Mark leaned forward, studying the photographs. "What kind of pattern?" Beth asked. "Well, look at this one." I pointed to a photo of a small apartment building. "We inspected this property in March, found major electrical problems that required immediate attention. The owner couldn't afford the repairs, so he sold to Mark's company for 40% below market value. Then, mysteriously, when Mark hired us to fix the problems, they turned out to be much simpler than we'd originally thought." "I don't understand," Becca said. "It means your uncle and your mother's boyfriend have been working together to cheat people out of their homes," I said, still smiling pleasantly. "Eddie," John started, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish. It's a beautiful scam, really. John would inspect a property and find problems that didn't exist, or exaggerate minor issues into major ones. The property owner would panic and sell cheap to Mark. Then Mark would hire John's new company to fix the problems at a fraction of what the original owner was quoted." I pulled out more documents. Bank records, inspection reports, property transfer documents. 43 properties in 18 months, $2 million in fraudulent transactions, and they used our family business's reputation to do it. Beth was staring at the documents, her face white. "John, tell me this isn't true." "It's not what it looks like," John said desperately. "Eddie's been having problems, making paranoid accusations. These are public records," I said, spreading out more papers. "Property transfers, inspection reports, bank deposits, all of it documented and verified." Mark Allen stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do," I said, "because there's more." I pulled out the insurance policy documents. John took out a $2 million life insurance policy on me 6 months ago, listed himself as the beneficiary, told the insurance company I was unstable. Bree gasped. Becca grabbed my arm. "The plan was beautiful," I continued. "Destroy my reputation, isolate me from my family, make everyone believe I was mentally unstable. Then, when I inevitably ended myself from the shame and despair, John would collect $2 million, and Beth would be free to marry Mark with everyone's sympathy." "That's insane," Beth said, but her voice was shaking. "Is it? Let's see, you've been having an affair for 8 months. You filed for divorce and got a restraining order based on false accusations. You've told our daughters I'm mentally ill. You've isolated me from my friends and family. John has stolen my business and spread rumors about my competence. And now I'm living alone in a motel, with no money, no family, and no future." I looked around the table at their faces. John looked sick. Mark looked angry. Beth looked terrified. If I were a weaker man, I might have ended myself by now, and you all would have profited from it. "Daddy," Bree whispered, "is this all true?" "I'm afraid so, sweetheart. But why would they do this to you?" "Because your mother wanted a richer husband, your uncle wanted more money for his pills habit, and Mark wanted a legitimate business to cover his real estate fraud." John jumped up from the table. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually, I can." I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. I've been recording this entire conversation, and I've already given copies of all these documents to the district attorney, the FBI, and the local newspaper. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of children playing in the distance. "You son of a witch," Mark Allen said. "That's my father you're talking about," I replied, "and he was a good man who taught me that actions have consequences." Beth was crying now. "Eddie, please, think about the girls." "I am thinking about the girls. I'm thinking about what kind of mother lies to them about their father. What kind of mother helps criminals steal their inheritance? What kind of mother puts them in danger by associating with fraudsters and pills users?" I stood up and put my arms around my daughters. "Girls, I want you to know that I love you more than anything in the world. I didn't abandon you, and I'm not mentally ill. These people lied to you because they wanted to steal everything our family built together." "What happens now?" Becca asked. "Now the truth comes out. Your mother, your uncle, and Mark are going to be arrested for fraud, conspiracy, and insurance fraud. You're going to come live with me while they sort out their legal problems." "You can't do this," Beth said desperately. "I'm their mother." "You're a criminal who put our children at risk to cover up your crimes," I said. The restraining order was based on false statements, which makes it perjury. The divorce papers were filed to hide assets from a criminal investigation, which makes it fraud, and the affair was part of a conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, which makes it racketeering. I looked at John, who was slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. "You always were the charming one. Let's see how charming you are in federal prison." Mark Allen was backing away from the table. "This is all circumstantial. You can't prove intent." "I can prove the insurance policy. I can prove the property fraud. I can prove the conspiracy. And I can prove that you've been planning this for months." I smiled at him. "You made one mistake, Mark. You underestimated how much a father will fight for his children." As if on cue, FBI agents appeared from various directions around the park. They'd been waiting in unmarked cars, dressed as joggers and dog walkers, ready to move when I gave them the signal. "Jonathan Parrish, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, insurance fraud, and racketeering," the lead agent said, pulling out handcuffs. "Elizabeth Parrish, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and filing false police reports. Mark Allen, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering." I watched them being handcuffed and read their rights while my daughters clung to me. Other families in the park had stopped their activities to stare at the spectacle. By evening, it would be the talk of the town. "Daddy," Bree said, "are we going to be okay?" "We're going to be better than okay," I said. "We're going to be free." As the FBI cars drove away with my former wife, brother, and his business partner, I sat back down at the picnic table with my daughters and began to explain what their new life would look like. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more people who put their own greed ahead of family. Just the three of us, building something honest and real from the ashes of everything that had been stolen from us. The sun was setting over Riverside Park, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Justice, it turned out, was even sweeter than revenge.